Hello, I'm Rodger Braveheart, and a very warm welcome to the 22-Minute Stories RIT channel. Today I'll be taking you through The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde by Robert Louis Stevenson, a dark and unforgettable story about hidden desires, divided identity, respectability, and the dangerous parts of human nature we try to keep buried. I'd really welcome your suggestions. If there are any classic books you'd like me to cover in the future, please let me know in the comments. Okay, so without further delay, let's get cracking. Mr. Utterson, a cold yet lovable lawyer, is on his weekly Sunday walk with his cousin Richard Enfield. They pass a dingy, windowless building with a blistered door in a busy London street. Enfield points to the door and shares a disturbing story. Late one winter morning, Enfield witnessed a small, sinister man collide with a young girl at a street corner. Horrifyingly, the man calmly trampled over the screaming child and kept walking. Enfield pursued and caught the man, bringing him back to the scene. A crowd gathered, including the girl's family and a doctor. Everyone felt an immediate, intense loathing for the mysterious man. To avoid a public scandal, they forced him to pay £100 to the family. The man agreed, unlocked the blistered door with a key, and emerged with £10 in gold and a genuine cheque signed by a highly respected citizen. Enfield calls this place Blackmail House, assuming the gentleman is being blackmailed by the cruel trampler. Utterson asks for the trampler's name, and Enfield reveals it is Mr. Hyde. He describes Hyde as displeasing and detestable, giving off a strong impression of deformity, though he cannot specify why. Utterson, deeply affected, asks if Hyde used a key, which Enfield confirms. Utterson reveals he already knows the name of the cheque's drawer. The two men, realizing they have stumbled into a sensitive and dark matter, agree to make a bargain never to speak of this incident again. That evening, Utterson returns home in low spirits. He retrieves Dr. Jekyll's will from his safe, which dictates that in the event of Jekyll's death or disappearance for more than 3 months, all his possessions should go to Edward Hyde. This document has long troubled Utterson, but now that he knows Hyde's cruel nature, it terrifies him. Seeking answers, Utterson visits Dr. Lanyon, an old friend of both himself and Jekyll. Lanyon reveals he has seen little of Jekyll lately, having fallen out over Jekyll's unscientific balderdash. Lanyon has never heard of Hyde. Utterson returns home to a restless sleep, haunted by faceless nightmares of Hyde trampling children and dominating Jekyll. Determined to solve the mystery, Utterson begins watching the blistered door at all hours. His patience is rewarded on a cold night when he hears light, odd footsteps. A small, plainly dressed man approaches and draws a key. Utterson steps out and addresses him as Mr. Hyde. Hyde shrinks back, but answers coolly. Utterson asks to see his face, and Hyde complies, staring defiantly. Hyde then provides his address in Soho, which makes Utterson suspect Hyde is thinking of the will. When Utterson claims they have common friends like Jekyll, Hyde angrily accuses him of lying and quickly slips inside. Utterson is left in deep perplexity, overwhelmed by disgust and fear. He describes Hyde as dwarfish, deformed without a nameable malformation, and troglodytic. Utterson then visits Jekyll's house around the corner. The butler Poole informs him Jekyll is out and confirms the servants have orders to obey Hyde, who has a key to the laboratory. Utterson leaves with a heavy heart, fearing Jekyll is being blackmailed for past sins. 2 weeks later, Dr. Jekyll hosts a pleasant dinner party for several old friends, including Utterson. After the other guests depart, Utterson remains behind to speak with Jekyll about his will. Jekyll is a large, well-made, kind-faced man of 50 who clearly holds a warm affection for the lawyer. When Utterson brings up the distasteful topic of the will, Jekyll tries to dismiss it gaily, calling Lanyon a hide-bound pedant over their scientific differences. Utterson ruthlessly steers the conversation back, stating he has been learning about young Hyde. At this, Jekyll's face grows pale, and a blackness comes over his eyes. He insists he does not wish to hear more, and that they had agreed to drop the matter. Utterson describes what he heard about Hyde as abominable, but Jekyll replies that his position is extremely strange and cannot be mended by talking. Utterson pleads with Jekyll to make a clean breast of his troubles in confidence, promising he can help him. Jekyll warmly thanks Utterson and expresses his absolute trust in him, but assures him that the situation is not as bad as he fancies. He declares that the moment he chooses, he can be rid of Mr. Hyde. He begs Utterson to let the matter sleep. Jekyll then confesses he has a very great interest in poor Hyde, and asks Utterson to promise that, if Jekyll is taken away, the lawyer will secure Hyde's rights and help him. Utterson sighs deeply, admitting he can never like Hyde, but ultimately gives his solemn promise to help him for Jekyll's sake. Nearly a year later, in October, London is shocked by an exceptionally brutal crime. A maidservant, looking out her window on a moonlit night, witnesses an encounter in a quiet lane. She sees an elderly, beautiful gentleman with white hair politely approach a very small gentleman whom she recognizes as Mr. Hyde. Suddenly, Hyde erupts in a furious rage, brandishing a heavy cane. He clubs the old man to the earth and with ape-like fury tramples him, shattering his bones. The maid faints in horror and calls the police at 2 a.m. The murderer has fled, leaving the mangled victim. A purse, a gold watch, and a sealed envelope addressed to Mr. Utterson are found on the body. The next morning, the letter is brought to Utterson, who identifies the victim as Sir Danvers Carew. When shown the broken murder weapon, Utterson recognizes it as a heavy cane he had presented to Dr. Jekyll years ago. Utterson leads Inspector Newcomen to Hyde's address in Soho. They drive through a dismal, foggy London that feels like a nightmare. At the dingy Soho house, an old woman with an evil face but polite manners lets them in, confirming Hyde lives there but is rarely home. They search Hyde's luxury rooms, which have been hurriedly ransacked. In the ashes they find the burned remains of a green chequebook and the other half of the broken cane. The inspector is delighted, realizing they have clear evidence. However, finding Hyde proves difficult. He has no family, has never been photographed, and witnesses only agree on his haunting sense of deformity. Late that afternoon, Utterson visits Dr. Jekyll and is admitted to the laboratory building. He crosses the cold, silent dissecting room and enters Jekyll's private cabinet. Jekyll sits by the fire looking deadly sick and welcomes Utterson in a changed, weak voice. Utterson asks if Jekyll has heard the news of Carew's murder and demands to know if he is hiding Hyde. Jekyll solemnly swears to God that he will never set eyes on Hyde again, declaring their relationship is finished. He claims Hyde is safe and will never be heard of again. Jekyll then asks Utterson for advice regarding a letter he received, which he is hesitant to show the police. The letter, signed by Edward Hyde, states that Jekyll need not worry about Hyde's safety, as Hyde has secure means of escape. Utterson is relieved, believing the letter clears Jekyll's name. Jekyll admits Hyde dictated the terms of the will regarding his disappearance, and Utterson realizes Hyde intended to murder Jekyll. On his way out, Utterson asks Poole about the messenger who delivered the letter, but Poole insists no mail arrived except by post. This renews Utterson's fears, suggesting the letter was written in the cabinet or delivered via the laboratory. Seeking counsel, Utterson speaks with his head clerk, Mr. Guest, an expert in handwriting. When a dinner invitation from Jekyll arrives, Guest compares Jekyll's writing with Hyde's letter. Guest points out a singular resemblance. The handwritings are identical, only sloped differently. Utterson is horrified, concluding that Jekyll forged a letter to protect a murderer and locks the document in his safe with a cold dread. Time passes, and despite a large reward, Mr. Hyde remains completely missing. As his evil influence fades, Dr. Jekyll emerges from seclusion, renewing friendships, performing charities, and turning to religion. For over 2 months, Jekyll is at peace. However, in mid-January, Jekyll suddenly shuts his door to Utterson, with Poole stating the doctor is confined to the house. Utterson visits Dr. Lanyon and is shocked by his friend's altered appearance. Lanyon looks pale, wasted, and visibly older, bearing a look of deep-seated terror. Lanyon declares himself a doomed man who has suffered a shock from which he will never recover. When Utterson mentions Jekyll's illness, Lanyon's face changes, and he tremblingly demands to hear no more of Jekyll, whom he regards as dead. Lanyon tells Utterson that after his death the lawyer may learn the truth, but for now they must speak of other things. Utterson writes to Jekyll to complain of his exclusion and ask about the quarrel. Jekyll replies pathetically, agreeing they must never meet again. Jekyll explains he must lead a life of extreme seclusion, having brought upon himself a nameless punishment and danger. A week later, Lanyon takes to his bed and dies. After the funeral, Utterson opens a sealed envelope from Lanyon, marked to be destroyed unread if Utterson dies first. Inside, he finds another sealed envelope, not to be opened until the death or disappearance of Jekyll. Utterson is stunned by the word disappearance again. Out of professional honour, he locks the packet away. Over time, Utterson's visits to Jekyll's house decline, as he is constantly denied entry and grows weary of the gloomy reports. On a Sunday walk, Utterson and Enfield pass through the familiar by-street and stop to look at the blistered door. Enfield remarks that the story of Hyde is finally at an end. Utterson agrees, admitting he once saw Hyde and felt the same repulsion. Enfield confesses he was foolish not to realise earlier that the building was a back entrance to Jekyll's house. Utterson suggests they step into the courtyard to look at the windows, feeling uneasy about Jekyll and hoping the presence of friends might cheer him. The courtyard is cool, damp, and filled with premature twilight. They see Jekyll sitting beside a half-open window, looking infinitely sad like a disconsolate prisoner. Utterson calls out to him, urging him to come outside and walk with them to whip up his circulation. Jekyll drearily replies that he is very low and that it will not last long. He declines the invitation, stating it is quite impossible for him to go, though he is glad to see them. He expresses regret that his quarters are not fit to invite them up. Utterson suggests they stay in the yard and talk from below. Jekyll smiles and agrees, but suddenly the smile is struck from his face. It is replaced by an expression of abject terror and despair that freezes the blood of both onlookers. The window is instantly slammed down. Utterson and Enfield leave the courtyard in stunned silence. They walk to a busy thoroughfare before Utterson finally looks at his pale companion. With horror in their eyes, Utterson begs God to forgive them, and Enfield nods seriously. One evening, Utterson is surprised by a visit from Jekyll's butler, Poole, who is pale and terrified. Poole confesses he is afraid because Jekyll has shut himself in his cabinet for a week, and he suspects foul play. Utterson immediately accompanies Poole to Jekyll's house. They walk through wild, cold, deserted streets under a pale moon. At the house, they find the servants huddled together in the hall, weeping in fear. Poole leads Utterson to the laboratory and knocks on the cabinet door, announcing Utterson. A complaining voice from within answers that he cannot see anyone. Poole takes Utterson to the kitchen and asks if that sounded like Jekyll's voice. He asserts that Jekyll was made away with 8 days ago, and someone else is in the cabinet. Poole explains that the creature has been crying night and day for a specific drug, writing orders on paper and throwing them on the stairs. Poole has ransacked every chemist in London, but each batch was returned as impure. Poole shows Utterson a note begging the chemists for some of the old supply. Poole also recounts seeing a masked figure digging in the laboratory, who cried out like a rat and fled. Poole is certain the dwarfish masked creature was Mr. Hyde. Utterson decides they must break down the door. Armed with an axe and a poker, they warn the figure inside. The voice begs for mercy, but Utterson recognizes it as Hyde's. Poole breaks the door down with 5 blows. Inside, they find a quiet room with a fire, tea things, and the body of Hyde twitching and dying from self-administered poison. Jekyll is nowhere to be found. This block presents Dr. Lanyon's written narrative, which Utterson reads at home. On January 9th, Lanyon received a registered letter from Jekyll, desperately pleading for help. Jekyll instructed Lanyon to drive to his house, force open his cabinet door with Poole's help, and retrieve a specific drawer containing powders, a file, and a notebook. Lanyon was to bring this drawer to Cavendish Square and wait. At midnight, a messenger would arrive to claim it. Believing Jekyll was insane, Lanyon nevertheless complied. He retrieved the drawer and examined its contents. A white crystalline salt, a blood-red pungent liquid, and a notebook recording years of experiments. At midnight, a small, strangely dressed man arrived, wearing clothes far too large for him. Lanyon felt an immediate, chilling disgust in his presence. The visitor was consumed with frantic impatience. Upon seeing the drawer, he sobbed with immense relief. He mixed the red liquid and white powder, creating a compound that effervesced and turned from purple to watery green. The visitor then offered Lanyon a choice, to let him leave with the glass, or to witness a scientific prodigy that would stagger his belief. Lanyon, determined to see the end of the mystery, chose to watch. The visitor drank the potion. He reeled, gasped, and began to change. His features melted and altered before Lanyon's eyes. When the transformation was complete, Henry Jekyll stood before him. Lanyon's soul sickened at Jekyll's subsequent confession. The shock shattered Lanyon's life, leaving him in constant terror and leading to his death. He concludes by revealing that the creature who came to his house was Mr. Hyde, the murderer of Carew. This block covers Dr. Jekyll's full written confession. Born to a large fortune and endowed with excellent qualities, Jekyll possessed an impatient gaiety that he found hard to reconcile with his desire to maintain a grave public image. This led him to conceal his pleasures, committing him to a profound duplicity of life. His scientific studies in transcendental medicine led him to realize that man is not truly one but truly two. He dreamed of separating these dual elements of good and evil, so that each could live free from the other's conflict. Jekyll successfully compounded a drug that could temporarily dissolve his physical body and substitute a form representing his lower evil nature. Drinking the potion, he experienced racking pangs followed by an incredibly sweet, youthful and reckless sensation. He became Edward Hyde, a smaller, younger, and purely evil being. Jekyll set up a house in Soho for Hyde and instructed his servants to obey him. He enjoyed the complete freedom of Hyde's wicked pleasures, knowing he could easily return to Jekyll's shape by drinking the potion again. However, Hyde's pleasures soon turned monstrous. One morning, Jekyll woke up in his bed to find he had transformed into Hyde without taking the drug. Realizing he was losing control, Jekyll chose to remain as Jekyll and abstained from the drug for 2 months. But in a moment of weakness, he drank the potion again. His caged evil emerged with furious energy, leading him to brutally murder Sir Danvers Carew. Terrified of the gallows, Jekyll swore to abandon Hyde forever. But while sitting in Regent's Park, a vain, glorious thought triggered an involuntary transformation into Hyde. Desperate, he wrote to Lanyon to secure his drugs. Eventually, the drug's power weakened, requiring constant doses to remain as Jekyll. When his supply of the essential salt ran low, Jekyll discovered the original batch was impure and the new pure salt was ineffective. Realizing he will soon permanently become Hyde, Jekyll finishes his confession, knowing Hyde will either face the scaffold or commit suicide. The book suggests a profound warning about the dangers of denying and suppressing the dual nature inherent within every human being. Through the tragic downfall of Dr. Jekyll, the story highlights that the human soul is a complex battleground of coexisting good and evil forces. I believe the author is drawing attention to the destructive consequences of societal hypocrisy and the rigid demands of maintaining an unblemished public reputation. By forcing his darker impulses into complete secrecy, Jekyll inadvertently nurtures a concentrated, unbridled monster in the form of Mr. Hyde. I think the narrative serves as a powerful moral lesson that attempting to completely sever or isolate one's flaws, rather than acknowledging and integrating them through self-discipline, only leads to a loss of control. The book suggests that evil, when caged, and ignored, only grows more violent and desperate for release. I believe the story also offers a sharp criticism of scientific arrogance and the hubris of attempting to alter the fundamental laws of human nature. Jekyll's belief that he could master his dual identity and enjoy the pleasures of sin without consequence ultimately leads to his total enslavement and destruction. I think the author may be warning us that we cannot selectively indulge our worst instincts under a mask of anonymity without corrupting our entire character. Ultimately, the story highlights that true integrity requires facing our inner darkness honestly, rather than seeking a convenient chemical escape that splits the self. I believe this tragic tale shows that we must take responsibility for all parts of our character. Thank you for staying till the end. You obviously are a glutton for punishment. Please hit the like icon if you thought this video deserves it, so other people get to see it. Let me know in the comments which book you would like me to read to you next. Now YouTube have put on screen a channel subscribe icon and below it my latest video for you to check out. See you next time.